Guys, today we have our second half of our pre and post testing for Revenant Act 2. Now, if you missed our first video, go check it out. Essentially, Sentinel Shield is busted. Really. It's doing like way more damage than what it's supposed to be doing. 172% more damage, actually. And crazy enough, Bungie hasn't said a thing about it, which makes me think they may let this thing slide. Now, with that being said, today's video is going to focus on the rest of our changes that hit our sandbox, from weapon tuning to PvP Sandbox changes, the rest of our exotic armor pieces, and more. Which is why we're going to be kicking things off with Telesto. Ah, yes. Arguably my favorite weapon in the game. Bungie has increased Telesto's detonation damage by 20% in PvE. Now, they also fixed an issue where Telesto was doing less damage than intended inside of PvP, which turns out to be a 20% buff as well. That's right, guys. 39 damage per bolt is what we were doing before. Now we're doing 47 damage per bolt, which means Telesto is back to getting kills in just 5 bolts, fellas. It's nasty. We used it inside of trials this past weekend with Frost bolts, and guys, Telesto was so clutch. Now, as far as PvE goes, yeah, you got a 20% buff. And no lie, the catalyst and the trait on this weapon is actually meant more for PvE than it is for PvP. The only downside is we really don't have anything artifact mod wise for fusion rifles. Now, will we get that? No lie, I think it's possible. Act 3 is right around the corner, and by right around the corner, I mean next year. But if I was a betting man, and I am, I will bet a god roll right here, right now, that a fusion rifle mod of some sort will be dropping on us in Act 3. Next up, we have Eriana's Vow. Bungie fixed an issue where Eriana's Vow is dealing reduced critical damage inside of PvP. Now, for those that don't know, Eriana's Vow is a lot better inside of PvE, and I know this is about PvP, but I just got to bring up that Eriana's Vow and its chaining ignition capabilities is quite a sight to behold. Now, inside of PvP, pre-data, we had 164 damage per crit, and that was with First Glance. Without it, it drops down to 124. Now, post, Eriana is now doing 190 damage with First Glance procced, and 143 without it. So about a 15% increase in damage here for both. Now, some of you may be thinking, Cross, why does this even matter? Who's using Eriana's Vow in PvP? Yeah, that would be us. We love using Eriana's Vow in PvP. We actually had an entire weekend of trials where we used nothing but Eriana's Vow because of its one-hit capabilities when stacking certain buffs. And as you can see here, yes, with this update inside of an Empowering Rift, you can get the one tap, at least on Guardian 6 resilience or less, as it hits for 218 damage. Hot! Next, we have Thorn and Lumina. They both got a buff to their stability by a whopping 5. The fellas, go in there today, grab thy Thorn and Lumina, and see if you can beat that pulse rifle. I believe in you. Next up, we got a few changes that we actually didn't see mentioned beforehand, that being Grand Overture. Arguably the biggest blunder of the sandbox changes that nobody else is enraged about more than myself. Bungie fixed an issue that allowed missiles to be loaded by shooting at immune targets. Now, this is confirmed. It is in fact fixed. People would do this on things like the Corrupted Puppeteer final boss and Vesper's Hose before starting the boss encounter. That way they can have fully loaded shots. And across the board, everywhere has been fixed. Anything that had an immunity shield. Templar is an example, which really kills the viability of this exotic. Don't get me wrong, Grand Overture is fine by itself, but what made it so good was the ability to preload your loads into one ginormous load and then proceed to blow thy load in a single shot right at the very beginning of a damage phase. This is a huge nerf, fellas. I hate to see it. Bungie, please reverse it. I know you won't, which is why we as a community need to collectively come together and figure out a workaround, because this sucks. Now, last up for our exotic weapons, we have Tessellation. Bungie fixed an issue where Tessellation lost all ammo and cannot be fired or reloaded if an artifact mod, an armor mod, or a subclass change was made with property irreducible active. On top of that, players can now reload Tessellation while property irreducible is active, and doing so removes property irreducible, similar to Izanagi's Burden. Now, we confirm that you keep all your ammo, and you can fire and reload Tessellation if you swap subclasses, as well as armor mods or even artifact perks when property irreducible is active. We also confirm that reloading with property irreducible active will remove it. So there you go, guys. Go crazy. Now, moving on to our weapon changes. First up, Precision Bows has had its body shot increase by 10%. This being for PvP. Essentially, pre-badge Precision Bows would do 91 damage to the body, allowing you only to one crit one body with the Precision Bow on Guardians tier 5 resilience and under. Now, though, it's doing 101 damage to the body, which does allow you to get that one crit one body even at 10 resilience. Let me just say, special place in hell for bow users in PvP. Next up, we have hand cannons. 120 round per minute hand cannons received a very big buff. Now, it may not seem like much, it's 3%, but it's just enough to allow all 120s in the game to 2 crit one body at all resilience levels, which is why you've been seeing more and more 120s. I even broke out things like Steady Hand this past weekend, but if you got Igneous Hammer, Criminal's Dagger, which is going to be back next week with Ironbender, but this has really changed the god rolls for our 120s. No longer do we need precision instruments to pull off that 2 crit one body, as that was pretty much required previously to get that 2 crit one body on max resilience Guardians. Now, pre-updates, you could get the 2 crit one body on tier 7's resilience Guardians and below. Now, with this damage increase, this made us go back to the drawing board, guys, and just see how our damage perks have been affected. For instance, kill clip on a 120 could only 2-tap Guardians tier 5 resilience and below. Now post buff, you can actually 2-tap Guardians tier 8 resilience and below. And that's a fast time to kill of 0.5 seconds. We also tested Adagio, which would previously give us the 2-tap on Guardians tier 9 resilience and below. Now though, Adagio can in fact give you the 2-tap even at max resilience, which is a 0.6 time to kill value. Igneous Hammer also received a small nerf with the stability, handling, and aim assist being dropped by 3. These were the pre-stats, and these are now the post-stats. Let me just say though, Igneous is already such a stat monster that I feel like for the most part will be just fine. Now Better Devils actually got those stats, getting +3 added to its aim assist, handling, and stability. And I have been seeing more people using Better Devils inside of PvP. Now on the topic of hand cannons, we need to bring up a weapon perk that just got nerfed. That is Explosive Payload. Bungie stated that the splash damage has been reduced against players only on legendary hand cannons by 7%. Now what this really means is that pre-update, a 120 round per minute hand cannon with Explosive Payload would deal 65 damage plus 24 to the head and 24 to the body, which will allow us to get the kill in 2 crits, 1 body at tier 6 resilience and below, which is just 1 resilience below what a 120 could do previously. Now post, a 120 with Explosive Payload does 67 damage plus 23 to the head and 25 to the body. So you see some drop, but also some pickup there after the buff to 120s itself. Currently right now what that means is that you can 2 crit 1 body on Guardian 7 resilience and under. Now how has this affected things like 140 round per minute hand cannons, most notably things like Rose? Previously it was doing 58 damage plus 23 to the head and 23 to the body. Post though, a 140 does 58 damage plus 21 to the head and 23 to the body. So definitely a nerf, guys. Keep in mind you're still able to 3-tap even Guardians at max resilience, but again, the design here is to make Explosive Payload have more severe damage fall off outside of its optimal ranges, and that's definitely what 140s with Explosive Payload runs into. Now that's not to say that Explosive Payload isn't good. I still very much like it. Its flinching capabilities, its splash damage. I think for things like Rose, I'm still going to keep using it, but for weapons like 120s, I'm probably going to look elsewhere. I think I'm going to look at things like kill clip, maybe even that Adagio roll, or perhaps I even just lean into more consistency traits. For instance, round robin, which can roll things like opening shots. What I will say though is that 120 round per minute hand cannons are feeling a lot better. It may not seem like much, but that 1 shot of forgiveness there at max resilience is enough to give it an edge in the current meta. Now, the topic of hand cannons, we do need to talk about yesterday's question. Headseeker is a perk that can roll in this burst fire hand cannon, and previously it was not increasing our critical hit damage and essentially was not working like it was supposed to. Now, it was still getting its aim assist increase, but it wasn't getting the increase in damage. Currently though, Headseeker is working on yesterday's question, which is picking up our crit damage from 53 to 57. Now, what does that mean time to kill wise? Well, unfortunately, at least from our testing here, not that much. At base, this archetype can already kill in 5 crits 1 body at all resilience level, and testing this with Headseeker now, you're still locked into that 5 crits 1 body. Even at 1 resilience, you can't even do things like 4 crits and 2 body. And like, I love Headseeker, but the reason why I like it on things like pulse rifles is because one of those shots out of the 3 in that burst, if the first one is a body shot and the other 2 are crits, they'll of course get that increase in damage. As for yesterday's question though, I'm still going to be keeping it almost like a just in case. We get another buff down the road, my role of Lone Wolf plus Headseeker might be the play. Now next up we have machine guns. Bungie has changed the scale that determines how much ammo you pick up from a crate inside of PvP. Essentially, the bigger your magazine, the more heavy ammo you pick up. Now we tested a bunch of different machine guns across various archetypes and various magazine sizes just to see how much ammo they got pre versus post. Now first up, we have the shiny curated roll of Hammerhead. This has a mag size of 59, and previously it would receive 25 rounds. Now post, it receives 26 rounds. Next we have the Speleologist, which has a mag size of 72. Previously it got 29 rounds, now it receives 26. Next we have Retrofit Excavade. This is also a rapid fire machine gun, but with extended mag, it increases our mag size to 97. Pre would receive 29 ammo, but look at this, guys, jumps up to 43. Next we have Terminus Horizon. This is a high impact. Previously it would receive 21 ammo, and post, it still receives 21. We also have Pro Memoria. This is an aggressive frame, which has a mag size of 82. Previously it would receive 29 rounds, now it gets 28. Now next we wanted to test exotics, things like Thunderlord for instance, which have 62 rounds in a mag. Previously it would receive 25, now it gets 26. Xenophage with a mag size of 13 just gets 4 ammo for both pre and post update. Now I was especially interested for exotics like Heir Apparent. Now previously it would get 68 rounds. Post though, it gets 75, which may not seem like a whole lot, but again, a huge reason why we use this exotic inside of PvP was the shielding capabilities and just like disrupting the enemy by being a tank, at least until somebody breaks that arc. But it's clear to see, guys, that that the bigger the magazine, the more ammo you can get. And originally I thought this wasn't going to be enough to push us away from things like adaptive machine guns, but for some of these machine guns, it's definitely worth it. Now last up we have micro missile frame grenade launchers. Bungie has increased the velocity players can generate with rocket jumping. Now we don't really have a number in terms of like height differences, but as you can see with these two clips of pre versus post, those being side by side, you do rocket jump quite a bit higher now than you previously did with mount top. Now moving on to exotic armor pieces. Now if you haven't checked it out guys, please do. We did a pre versus post for just our supers, which covered Raid and Flux and Balladors. Today though, we're going to be talking about the other exotics that were affected with this update. First we have point contact cannon brace. Amplifying bolts now do 100% increased damage upper base, up from 50%. On top of that, lightning strike final blows now also refund melee energy. Now because of that, Bungie has reduced thunderclap refund by 10% to compensate for increased energy gains on average. Now previously at base, our lightning strikes would deal 9,656 damage, and then amplified you would jump up to 14,484 damage, which was at 50% increase. Now post, they deal 19,312 damage, giving us that 100% increase. Now previously, only defeating targets with the thunderclap melee itself would restore melee energy, but now you can see that those lightning strikes also restore melee energy as well. Now keep in mind guys, this buff is only for contact brace itself, not for spirit of contact, that being the exotic class item. That one has not been affected at all, not in its damage and also not in its energy gains. No lie guys, I am loving this buff. We actually did our first build battle this week with a point contact cannon brace build, and hot damn was it amazing. Literally allowed me to solo the Grandmaster Nightfall with complete ease. Now next we have Knucklehead Radar. Bungie has changed the activation requirements of its perk. It now requires the wearer to damage a player to mark them as a target. On top of that, the duration that the target can be marked has been reduced from 7 seconds down to 3 seconds. Now previously you could see here guys, you can mark a target simply by just looking at them, and then the mark would last for 7 seconds. It's really good. Now post though, you literally have to damage the target. Now it can be damaged from literally any source. A gunshot, an ability, any of those will mark the targets. But again, it only lasts for 3 seconds versus the 7 that it could before. Now keep in mind, Knucklehead Radar still does what it's supposed to do. It allows you to keep your radar while aiming down sights. Again, originally those marking capabilities was never a part of this exotic. It was actually deprecated from Foe Tracer and moved to Knucklehead Radar itself. Next we have High Ground. This was a perk that was becoming a bit of a problem with certain weapons, most notably Bygones. Now we've been using High Ground now for many months on a number of other weapons, so I hate to see it getting hit. Essentially though, Bungie has made the change where dealing damage to a player with a primary weapon now only grants a single stack of the damage buff. However, if you deal damage with a special weapon that has High Ground or against combatants, that will continue to grant maximum stacks. Now they also said they fixed a bug that allows some archetypes to activate the perk when damaging targets while airborne. But currently right now guys, this perk is actually disabled. Granted, by the time this video goes out, maybe it's been fixed, but Bungie Help even posted on Twitter just the other day. They stated that we have identified an issue where the fix intended to correct High Ground's activation while airborne conflicts with a change designed to reduce stacks accumulation from damaging players. This causes High Ground to deal more damage than intended against other players. So we've disabled this perk in the Crucible and it will be fixed in a future release. So unfortunately, we can't compare pre to post on this, but as soon as we get this fixed, guys, we'll be taking a look. Again, ultimately, this is definitely going to hurt weapons like Bygones with High Grounds and even Time Worn Wayfarer, which I heavily utilize with this perk. Now moving on, we have some ability changes to go over. First up, for my Prismatic subclasses, ability cooldowns have been increased by 15%, meaning it takes longer to get those abilities. Now in some of our pre and post testing here, we maintain the same stat points. For instance, our Hunter here, testing our class ability at 60 mobility. Pre, we got our dodge back in just under 41 seconds, compared to post, which took 53 seconds. For time, we have 100 resilience, and it takes 21 seconds to get our thruster back. Post though, it now takes 26 seconds. For warlocks, if you have 70 recovery, pre would take 1 minute to recharge. Post, it now takes 1 minute and 14 seconds. So as you can see pretty much across the board, guys, there's your 15% increase in ability cooldowns when using Prismatic, which is why if you notice even this past weekend in trials, people are starting to move back in the direction of normal subclasses. Next, we have Combination Blow. Now, Combination Blow got a nerf as well, with its bonus damage against combatants being reduced by around 17%. Now, we actually didn't even know this was going to happen. This was actually snuck into the patch notes, which is why we only have post status for this, guys. I wish I had some pre-data to reflect on this, but yeah, kind of a weird one. I was not expecting Combination Blow to get hit, especially considering the artifact mods that were brought to us in Act 2 have us kind of like leaning into this more aggressive up-close playstyle. Now, Ward of Dawn. This is another super that got a change. We actually left it out of our super damage testing video because it's more of a utility change change. Essentially, Ward of Dawn now draws enemy fire when an ally is standing inside of it. Again, similar behavior to that of our barricade, which now taunts enemies. Now, testing in game, yes, I can confirm when you stand in a Ward of Dawn or an ally stands in your Ward of Dawn, it draws enemy fire. Very similar to barricades. Even enemies that were right beside me were shooting the bubble instead. Now, Ward of Dawn also has an ability to boop enemies, which yes, it does. As you can see here, guys, it boops. Now, to close out this video, guys, we're going to be touching on the big issues that have been around since Revenant first launched. First up is Kinetic Impacts. This is the Column 5 artifact mod. Bungie has fixed an issue where the Column 5 artifact mod was not working with all grenade launchers. They also fixed an issue where the mod's bonus impact damage was not being scaled correctly. And they fixed an issue where triggering the mod took more damage instances than intended. Now, previously, it would take 5 whole shots from a heavy grenade launcher to proc Kinetic Impacts, which is quite a lot. On top of that, the damage really wasn't that good. It would hit Coral for 7,242 damage, and it would hit twice, and then that was it. And to make matters worse, the mod would only work with things like adaptive heavy grenade launchers. The workaround was that you had to equip a special or even a primary grenade launcher in one of your other slots to get it to work. It was very annoying. Post, though, this artifact mod is definitely better. First up, the regular adaptive heavy grenade launcher now only takes 3 shots to proc Kinetic Impacts, which is huge. Damage-wise, it's also better. Now dealing 11,556 damage, totaling 23,112 damage when perfectly landed. And it's also working beautifully with things like Anarchy. You could proc it in just 2 shots. And across the board, it seems to be working much better with all of our other grenade launchers without the need of another grenade launcher being equipped. Now, this takes us to our second and probably even our bigger bug from last season, that being the ignition bug. Bungie has fixed an issue where ignitions were incorrectly scaling damage against all bosses instead of just Ranix unified, resulting in lower than expected damage. Essentially, guys, in the second encounter of the dungeon, Bungie wanted to make sure we didn't go in there and just lay waste to this boss with our ignitions. So they wanted to scale back ignition damage, but just to that boss. Unfortunately, this affected literally everything in the game and every source of ignitions. Now, if you see us doing damage here on Greg with Song of Flame, previously, our ignition damage would start at 34,502 damage. And then every ignition afterwards would get lower and lower until our ignitions would reach a whopping 884 damage, which is a huge pullback. Post update though, guys, ignitions, I'm proud to say, are properly working. Here you can see it on Carl. We're hitting for just over 36,000 damage every single time. No more getting cut in half. No more diminishing returns. Outside of Ranix, ignitions are working like they're supposed to. So guys, those are our pre and post testing for update 8.1.5. Let me know in the comments below if we missed anything. Again, if you want to check out our super damage testing videos, feel free to check that out. TLDR on those, roaming supers are much better, especially Cinder. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,